Thank you for joining us today on this Tuesday morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And if you're joining us live from Australia and it's the middle of the night, that is dedication. My name is Blake Ryder, and I am the Director of Hospitality Research here at Lighthouse, based in sunny Denver, Colorado. And joining me from across the pond is my friend and colleague, Jean Gabriel. Jean Gabriel, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Blake, for the introduction and for having me today. I'm Jean-Gabriel Person, Strategic Account Manager for the French market. And I'm happy to be your boots on the ground for the Olympics webinar.
Today, we are going to be diving into some super interesting and very relevant lodging and accommodation performance data for the Paris Olympics. And what's particularly noteworthy is that, as you may or may not know, Lighthouse actually came to be. Its very formation is the direct result of hotel performance data during the Summer Olympics from London in 2012. So let me set the stage. It's 2012, and two of our three co-founders, Gino Engels and Adrian Coppens, were living in London. Their good friend and soon-to-be third co-founder, Matthias Hieroms, was a big sports fan, and he wanted to go to the Olympics. So he bought tickets, and because he didn't live in London, he looked up some hotel prices and saw prices were super expensive. And this was several months before the games were set to begin. So rather than spending, crazy prices, Matthias called his buddies, Gino and Adrian, and asked if he could crash on their sofa. So now it's about a week before the games are set to begin, and Matthias heard that some other friends recently got tickets to the Olympics, and they booked a hotel at a good price. So Matthias hops back on the internet, and he saw that prices had come down significantly. How could this be that prices came down so much before a huge event? So that very incident was the impetus for them to create a very early version of their tool that would eventually become the platform known as OTA Insight. They built a very early stage vision of the product, and they were able to get it in front of some of the brands, and the brands were instantly interested. And now, 12 years later, OTA Insight has since rebranded as Lighthouse, given how much the platform has grown and broadened in scope since the early OTA Insight days. Today, Lighthouse has over 65,000 customers using its hotel and short-term rental platform, to make better and more confident revenue decisions. And just like they celebrate gold medals in the Olympics, here we are to celebrate 4 consecutive years that Lighthouse won the gold in the Hotel Tech Report Awards, which is the Olympics of hotel technology, if you will. And that brings us full circle because of this Summer Olympics, which is why we are here today. So let's start with hotel pricing. 2 stories, 2 perspectives that we can look at this data, and context is everything. So let's start with Vantage Point A. On one hand, let's look at pricing for opening weekend of the Olympics. Now, it's important to note that this is not ADR. This is pricing data, meaning it's an average of the lowest bookable rates for the hotels in Lighthouse's data set for the time period in question. So pricing actualized at 303 euros for opening weekend, specifically Friday and Saturday nights. Compared to those same dates from 2023, and to be clear, we are doing a day-to-day comparison, so we are not comparing July 26th to July 26th. We are comparing final Friday of July 2024 to the final Friday of July 2023. Hotel pricing actualized for those equivalent Olympic dates at 187 euro. So comparing the year-over-year pricing data, that's a 62% increase. Fantastic. Now, let's look at Vantage Point B. This is advertised pricing. Advertised pricing, to be clear, is the lowest bookable price advertised for each day that we're looking at for each hotel within Lighthouse's data set. And what we can see here is this is advertising pricing as of July 2020 July 22nd, last week. And this is advertised pricing from April 22nd, 3 months prior. And what we can see here, that over the course of the Olympics, this is every single day of the Olympics, pricing over the last 3 months has come down nearly 33%. So despite that year-over-year bump that we looked at in Vantage Point A, here we see that pricing actually has come down quite markedly over the last 3 months. So from this, we can glean that operators are scrambling, or at least were, to fill rooms during the Olympics. And what's more is that we can look at this. This is the full advertised price evolution starting 350 days out, all the way through 14 days of lead time. So to be clear, this is 14 days of lead time ahead of every single day over the course of the Olympics. And I'm looking at 14 days because based on how our data processes, that allows us to get that 14-day lead time for every single day within the Olympics. And we could see that peak advertised pricing peaked at 530 euro, and that was at this lead time window of 337 to 333 days. That was when it peaked. And it has been steadily falling ever since. Jean-Gabriel, talk to me about this. Why do you think this is happening?
Well, for those kind of events, I think it, and just like what happened in London, I think I see 4 phases into the life cycle of the reservation path of those events. First one would be optimism. Demand seems to be unlimited. A lot of group requests that may or may not materialize. Hotels, whether want to put some restrictions, very high prices, as we can see on the graph, or even for some, close completely their distribution, expecting to have some opportunistic pricing more in the short term towards the arrivals. Then comes the monitoring phase, where users are checking the on the book, looking at how the market is behaving, and we see it very clearly on the graph. Then comes the realization, unless you have estimated your demand properly, then you may have some too many rooms available, and that's where due to little pickup, some group cancellations, hotels start to realize that what they expected in the optimistic phase actually are not the truth. Then comes the last part, which is the price dropping, because once you're empty and you're left with a lot of rooms, only thing you're left, is the only lever you've left to play with most of the time is the price, especially when, in that case, 3 weeks, 2 weeks before the Olympics, still 4 out of 5 hotels in Paris were available and open for sale. That's where hoteliers start panicking and drop their prices. Of course, it's not everyone. Some had some very early businesses managed to secure some groups and some non-refundable reservations. But as we can see in the price, most of the market starting panicking.
So before we move on to occupancy, there's just one more thing I want to show you guys. Let's look at this very same price evolution chart, but let's actually isolate it to 5-star hotels only, luxury. And what we see here is the opposite of what we saw with the aggregate data. We see here that luxury product very much was able to and still is able to drive rate. Other than this small stretch right over here of rate regression from day, call it 140 to day 40, otherwise we see healthy rate appreciation, which makes sense. If you're waiting to book last minute for the Olympics and you are looking for 5-star products, there's a good chance you are fairly desensitized to high prices and can afford to pay what the hotels are asking. So Jean-Gabriel, talk to me about this, the 5-star rate evolution.
No, absolutely. I think you mentioned one of the key points, which is a very different price sensitivity from the 5-star and Palace's clientele compared to the rest of the market. But I think what's key in there, rather than the price sensitivity of the customers, is also the strategy that was put in place by most of the five-star hotels and palaces. Historically, summer is not a volume-driven season for palaces and five-star hotels. And most of them actually did a bet on volume rather than prices. So they did not go above and beyond like the other segment did, and stayed rather within their events, but historical price grid.
So now let's actually switch gears and let's look at occupancy, okay? So opening weekend occupancy. In terms of timing, we'll do opening weekend, meaning Friday and Saturday nights. And we can see that for Paris, we are talking about 89.7% occupancy. In comparison, the same weekend in 2023, and to be clear, we are doing that day-to-day comparison. So comparing the last weekend in July, the last weekend in July, they were 77.7%, same time last year. Jean-Gabriel, how do you feel about that bump in occupancy for opening weekend? We're talking 12 percentage points year over year. Is that about what you would expect for an event like this?
I think it's very complicated to compare 2023 no Olympics summer seasons to 2024 Olympics opening weekends. So on a year-on-year comparison, it's very hard to come up with a good or bad conclusion. However, if we look compared to what we expected a few weeks back, looking at the delay in occupancy that most of the hotel were recording, I think we ended up really well compared to most of the demand signal we had a few weeks back.
And that's a great segue, actually, to where things were with this buildup. So what I want to do is I want to look at this. This is a buildup of occupancy in Paris during the Olympics. And each one of these lines represents the occupancy on the books by day, by evening, as of a certain date leading up to the Olympics. So we see this gray bar on the bottom. That was occupancy as of January 24th. Then the red line right over here as of April. So 3 months later, then 1 month later, then 1 month later. And then these last few bars on top, we went week to week to really get granular over the last month. Now, what I think is fascinating about this chart is just how much occupancy built up over the last month, okay? This is the Olympics. This is a global spectacle with interest across all nations across the world, and it's in Paris. Travel will take planning, as international travel typically does. People are planning further in advance. Yet we look at some of these dates, okay? And over the last month, for example, let's look at August 9th. Over the last month, so going from June of 24th to July 24th, we could see occupancy jumped from 64.15 to 79.64, almost 80%. Almost 15 percentage points over a 1 month stretch right before the Olympics. Now, comparatively speaking, occupancy only grew 9 percentage points on that August 9th date from May 24th to June. It went 55.56 to 64.15. And even more, if you go back further, you could see it only grew from 49.11 to 55.56% from April 24th to May 24th. So about 6.5 percentage points. Jean-Gabriel, what do you think caused this run-up in occupancy over the last month? Do you think this is largely due to prices continuing to come down?
Well, obviously, when you're in a market with dropping prices, the notion of urgency that you may have in other markets where the price is ascending is completely reversed. And the idea of waiting to book becomes a good idea, while on the opposite, it's a risk. So definitely the price dropping has an impact on last minute reservations. Two other points I may see would be the fact that the organization team took quite some time to display their full plans, probably for security reasons. And many people probably were waiting to see where to stay, which area would be red, which area would be blocked. And since, anyways, the word came out that Paris was far from full, they weren't really scared to not find accommodations. So they had the luxury to wait on that one. Right. Lastly, may not be major, but it's also impactful. We know a lot of second-hand ticket broker started delivering tickets, selling tickets in the market closer from the Olympics of people not being able to go. And that definitely had an impact on the demand in the market.
Totally. And one more thing I want to point out before we switch to short-term rentals, what I want to do is switch back to this chart. So before we do that, I want to show you this. Look, so this is 6 months out as of January 24th. On the books occupancy, January 24, 6 months out, it's in the 40% range, roughly, hovering around that 40% range. Now, if you're a hotelier, and 6 months before the opening ceremony of the Olympics, you're hovering in the 40s. What do? You cut rate, right? That's what you do. So 6 months out, they're hovering in the 40s. Look at this. Around 180 days ahead of time. What is that? 6 months. So 6 months ahead of time, rates are hovering in the 40s. What happens? Rate comes down precipitously. So right around when people start to panic about their OC, rate starts falling down much more significantly. So, Jean-Gabriel, we seem to find ourselves in the same position that we were in the London Olympics in 2012, which was how we started this presentation. Why do you think this is?
Well, once again, I think demand initially was really strong. There were some interest for Paris. Paris is the #1 destination worldwide. So definitely hotelier thought they could capitalize on that. However, I believe they underestimated customer price sensitivity. Yes, it's the Olympics. Yes, it's Paris. But every market has, its glass ceiling that you can't go through. And Olympics has proven us that when price is too high, then demand can disappear. That's the first point. You could add to that some security concern about Paris always being, hotspots of potential terrorist attacks. So people were careful about that. A lot of tickets were given to the French nationals and more particularly companies within the Parisian area that would not need some accommodation. That definitely slowed down. And the last one, which is very far from the list, is a short-term rental supply. And I think you have some very interesting information about that.
Yes, and that is a wonderful segue. Short-term rentals. Let's switch gear to the short-term rental market. I think this chart, this says it all. Short-term rental supply was just so stable for so long. And then you have this inflection point right here, right around February 2023, where supply growth just goes meteoric. Look at this. And when you isolate the supply data to simply one bedroom and studios, these are going to be the units that are most comparable to your traditional hotel rooms. And you see the exact same thing. Right at that February mark, it rockets upward. Now, Jean-Gabriel, how much of an impact do you think that this had on the inability for hotels to drive pricing during the Olympics?
Well, I think we need to put that into perspective. When we look at the units in short-term rentals, we're talking about thousands increase in supply. If we turn that into hotels, and let's take an average of 100 key hotels, which is already fairly large for Paris, that's an injection of 500 hotels just for the one-bedroom apartment. We're not even talking about the others. So can you imagine the impact on the market, even for the Olympics, of the injection of the equivalent of 500 hotels? That's absolutely massive.
Yeah, and so 100,000 additional rooms, unbelievable. And now we can actually take a look at the short-term rental ADR, okay? This is ADR on the books for each night of the Olympics. This is as of last week on the 25th, right before the Olympics started. And you can see these are these bottom two lines. This is 2023 data for pricing, and this is 2024 data. And you can see that studio and one bedroom and obviously all bedroom are all clearly above where it was in 2023. Now, if I was to put hotel data on this, it would be about a third of the way up in between that studio and one bedroom and the all bedrooms, right around a third of the way up. Now, a couple things. It is important to realize that our short-term rental data is not currently inclusive of platform fees. So your booking fees, your cleaning fees. So just realize that this is the base price that short-term rentals are being people are paying for short-term rentals. So once you factor in those platform fees, they're actually paying a bit more than what you are seeing here. Okay. So basically, Jean-Gabriel, before we wrap up, what are you hearing from hoteliers in the market? You are our boots on the ground. Talk to me.
Well, there are very two different feelings from the market. Let's start with the positive one. Some hotels are very happy with their performances, especially the one that managed to block some groups, secured their reservations early on at event level prices, but not crazy. Those are very happy with their performances today. Then on the other hand, you have those that took the risk to go very high in prices, put some restrictions, even stay close to distribution for quite some while. And those today really failed to fill their hotels and are struggling on the last minute markets, dropping the prices and hoping for some pickup.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay. And finally, let us end on this. Jean-Gabriel, other than the athletes raising the medals on the podium, who would you say are the winners here?
Well, as I just mentioned, hotels that had a clear strategy beforehand, that did not overestimate the demands or at least the price sensitivity of the customer. Those really are the winner. Then obviously Airbnb, it's a massive win for Airbnb. As you know, in Paris, you cannot rent your accommodation more than 120 rooms per year. So the only option for Airbnb to keep growing is to grow horizontally and to inject more apartments into the platform. And with this period of Olympics, even though they didn't sell 70% of the inventory, because that's what we saw, they still have massive amounts of apartment listed that now may be selling one weekend here, one weekend there. Now that the announce is done and people can easily put it on, they will definitely benefit from that. Other points, of course, short-term rentals owners that were very cautious about the way they priced, and the grand winner is really the last-minute traveler that had access to most of the hotels at reduced price, and that'll happen in descending markets.
Absolutely. The last-minute travelers don't always win, but in this case, they did.
Indeed.
So everybody, thank you all for your time, your participation, and your attention. We look forward to continuing to bring these live sessions and turn data complexity into revenue growth for the travel and hospitality industry. If any of these data points resonated with you and your specific needs, don't hesitate to get in touch. Scan the QR code right on the screen. And if you have any ideas for future analyses you would like to see, please send them our way. Just leave them in the comments right there. Thank you all again, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.